You're listening to the Arts Ed Podcast, episode number 17, a conversation with Zachary Gates, thoughts on education and artificial intelligence. Welcome to the Arts Ed Podcast, conversations through the perspective of the arts and education, hosted by educators and artists Shauna Longo and Edric DeBose. All right, everybody. Today, I am so excited. Edric and I are both excited to have the amazing Zach Gates here with us. Zach, I'll give you a little shameless plug, is co-author of my book with me, Integrating STEM with Music. There's that little shameless plug. But he is also an amazing, cutting-edge music educator and musician and artist. And I thought of no one better to have a conversation about artificial intelligence than Zach. So, hey, Zach, thanks for joining Edric and I today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for showing up.
Yeah, just tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a music production and piano teacher for a high school in central New Jersey in East Brunswick. And I do enjoy that very much in my day-to-day. When I'm not teaching those high school students, I'm also an adjunct professor for Westminster Choir College, teaching music technology over there, which is also where I graduated from. So I'm classically trained, even though I live squarely in the tech field now. On top of that, I am the NJMEA Emerging Ensembles Chair, in charge of starting the first modern band in the state, which is going to be really fantastic coming up in just a little bit.
And by the time this episode airs, it will have happened months prior.
Yes,
but that's okay. You know, it's all good. Yeah, Zach is absolutely cutting edge. That's where we have so much in common, that classical training, and yet so not classical in approaches.
It's true. Yeah. Just, always, especially looking to study voice, like one of the oldest instruments, and always trying to think, but how could we make it new?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And you're also a studio musician, a producer.
Yeah, I've been collecting equipment and kind of building my own home studio for quite a while, bringing in a bunch of different musicians to record a whole bunch of different types of projects. Love synthesizers and love guitar. And before I kind of got into the recording aspect, I had a lot of fun building like interactive art installations and different types of those things in New York City, and working with performance artists and kind of experiencing the contemporary art scene over there.
Very cool.
Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of interactive art installation? So what level of interaction? I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a couple friends going to the Fashion Institute of Technology as well as Hunter College that were in visual art majors. And, through knowing them and the work that they were doing in their, immediate Manhattan area, as well as a few locations in Brooklyn, they would have either different projects for classes or kind of collaborations with art spaces, independent art spaces, where they would have some conceptual idea and then come to me to see how technically it could be carried through. So if they wanted some interaction between the audience to be able to either move through the space or touch things in the space that would then react, sonically, that was what they would come to me to kind of achieve technically.
Right.
Very cool. Little thing I didn't know about you, Zach. Yeah, I love it. Love learning new things. All right. So let's kind of dig into this conversation about artificial intelligence. And I feel like there's kind of two camps, and there are people in between, but not a lot. It's like the fear camp and the excitement camp, right? And I feel like that's like with most technology, right? There's always a bit of fear, and then there's the people that like love it and eat it up and can't wait to like utilize it and figure it out and explore it. So, the fear side, I think people are afraid we're going to lose the human element, right? That emotional aspect of music and art creation and performance. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so I like totally get the fear, right? Because first of
Absolutely.
all, yeah, like anytime new tech comes out here, the first thought is how is it going to impact my, daily life for the negative? Because there's this inherent thing with change that I don't,
Right.
I don't know if you'd say the majority, don't jive with it or do, but I think we can see pretty consistently through history this real fear of change, especially in the relationship between technology and art. So, in talking about like autotune, for instance, there's the idea that it's going to destroy the art of singing. And, the same thing with the synthesizer. Like music unions and organizations were actively fighting against adopting synthesizers in classical music because they thought it was going to take jobs away from like clarinet players because why pay a professional clarinetist when you can make a synthesizer play it? So
Right.
forever there's been this fear of technology and art. Um, that's kind of persisted.
I think what you said earlier about fear of change is really what it is. Because change, there's a lot of conversations about the way in which the fear of change is hardwired in the human brain, right? So we want consistency. We want, to be able to predict the future and feel safe in what we're doing. And that's kind of, biologically hardwired in the brain. So
Yeah,
resistance, kind of a natural thing. Yeah.
absolutely. And just to that as well, I feel like the unknown aspect of it. Sure, when the
Absolutely.
synthesizer was introduced, we had the idea of, well, this is a new sonic terrain that we've never experienced before. And so it was sonic exploration alone. And to a degree, like the ability to program music, but mostly this new sonic world. But when we talk about the newness and the change of AI and its impact on art, I feel like because of the nature of the technology itself, there's so much more unknown, which I think contributes to a lot more fear for sure.
I think I could be wrong, but it seems to me like the term artificial intelligence sounds a lot more threatening than the idea of just automation. So automation is an idea that's been around for a while. We're kind of comfortable with that. But the idea of artificial intelligence seems to talk about this whole, again, the self-aware robots. So and the difference in the aesthetic between something that's been programmed versus something which is living, breathing, and human, and in the unique nature, the uniqueness of the human experience and understanding and creativity. I think that seems to be the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and honestly, like technology's always assisted in some capacity, right? Right, Zach?
Yeah,
In terms of creating music, right? That's how music creation has evolved and the music industry has evolved. Coming back from NAM, I can tell you how much the music industry has evolved and one of the coolest parts about going to the NAM show for those that don't know, which is at the end last week of January out in Anaheim, California, but is seeing the new cutting edge technologies. And NAM has really embraced the idea of artificial intelligence and promoted that in this year's conference. Like, come one, come all, and bring it. Let's put it out on the table. Don't hide it in the closet, and let's talk about it and let's see where it can take us.
absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot about this particular story of post-tonal serialism. As like funny as that sounds, but I think it's really funny that for all the years I was at Westminster Choir College in Princeton, I didn't know that I was going to school just down the street from some incredible history in the programming of music um, and of post-tonal serialism. So at the time in Princeton, they had in the music department, they were really pushing the lack of a better word. What's the word? Pushing the boundary. I want to say
Pushing
boundary.
the envelope.
Yeah, push it. Oh, synthesizer terminology right there.
Ah,
Pushing, but they were like truly pushing the envelope in terms of music composition post-tonally,
Huh.
to the point that they were running out of piano players who were willing to play the extreme complexity of the music that they were writing. Um,
Wow.
which led to the fact that the second most, right behind computer science majors at Princeton, the second most major that utilized the computer systems at Princeton during that time was the music department
Huh.
Huh, interesting.
to program the music that piano players were deciding that I'm not playing your stuff anymore. It's too tough.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So, like, when we talk about, the fear side of it is that people think it's gonna, make it all sound the same. And that's been like an argument with pop. I'm using air quotes here, folks, because I know you can't see me, but like pop music, right? Is that like, oh, it all sounds the same. And when someone new comes out that's doing something different, it's probably the different thing is a new technology they've kind of capitalized on or discovered or integrated within their music to give it a new sound, right? Now to me, that's exciting. Like that makes creation exciting of music. So it's kind of harnessing that new technology, right? Which is now cutting edge AI. That's what people are talking about, and how we can use it, and how it's not gonna like destroy the world of music.
I think part of it is, I think part of, again, the fear of something being destroyed, it has something to do with um, a narrowness of your concept of what music can be. So I mean, you think about hip hop, right? You think about sampling, and people talking about, well, they're not playing instruments anymore. It's not really music, or electronic music. Um, there's a lot of room for creativity. I think that's kind of what people seem to be missing sometimes in these conversations. There's a lot of room for what can be generated. Um, and it doesn't necessarily nullify, what has been established historically, or it doesn't make that it doesn't go away. There's something about the human being. There's something about the human experience that really we have this desire and need for connection. That's my hope in terms of looking at the future. So even as far back as, like, the videotapes, VCR. So when the VCR came out, people said, well, it's going to replace the theater experience, and we discovered that people still like to get together and go to the theater.
Right.
We still enjoy being around other people as we're watching a new movie for the first time. Um, yeah, I'm simply saying that I get the fear as well, and it shows up. So in terms of the visual arts, when movies first started being made, or television, that, well, that's going to replace painting, but it hasn't. So there's something really for me about uh, the human. Yeah, the machines cannot replace a certain level of human inventiveness. Um, so I just want to ask Zach a question. Something you wrote earlier, you talk about how if art was devoid of what could be considered traditional depictions of emotional expression, then is I'm curious about what you meant about symbolic aesthetic. What that term just I wanted, if you could take that apart for me. I wasn't really sure where you were going with that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So what I was saying there was just the idea that, you know, as new technology is created, it will inherently guide the sound or overall aesthetic of the art that people are trying to make with that technology. And I've found, especially like if you want to take it back to what I was saying earlier about post-tonal serialism, that aesthetic is, I think, pretty collectively understood in, today times, is that it's not really, you're not going to listen to it, on a jog. Um, usually,
Right.
usually, if you do, absolutely no shade.
Right.
You do.
Rock it out. If that gets you going, go with it.
Yeah, see, agreed. But it definitely has a particular aesthetic that could be what some would say is devoid of traditional aspects of expression. So, we're not hearing the crescendos that we're used to hearing. We're not hearing the harmonies and the cadences that we're used to hearing. And in some sense, you could say, oh, well, that's due to either a creative limitation or a technical limitation. but I think that it is also a reflection of values and therefore is symbolizing something. So to put the cap on the post-tonal serialism side, that was and that genre was arguably symbolizing the idea that instead of taking the 8 notes of the major scale and saying there's a hierarchy of notes, some notes are more important than others, it was actually trying to say, well, why are we enforcing a hierarchy in notes? Why are some notes more important than others? And this was during a huge civil rights movement. This was also during very philosophical conversations about, you know, communism in terms of the inherent value and worth of a person.
Yes.
And so saying that, you know, what if we made music where all notes were equal?
Right.
As a
Right.
symbol, and that generated an aesthetic that maybe not necessarily people enjoyed. And I think we see that in modern music. One particular artist that I'm a huge fan of, Ben Levin. People who may not know Ben Levin will definitely know his friend Adam Neely, who became really huge for his defending of Katy Perry's Dark Horse,
Mm.
both on YouTube and because of his YouTube video um, in court, defending whether or not Katy Perry stole that melody. But basically, Ben Levin has recently been creating these works of art that he releases on YouTube that um, seem like they were made with AI, but he shares his songwriting process and his animation style. And you know, like for a fact, documented that he made it, but he is just trying to express something about humanity and our relationship with technology and each other in a way that reflects these like harsh digital sonic moments and these lyrics that seem like they're nonsense and came from a broken AI word generator, but are actually his.
Very cool. Wow.
Yeah, so so there's a question forming in the back of my brain. I don't know that I can ask
Put it
it.
to words yet?
Yeah, so it has but it has something to do with the crossover of where certain worlds crossover, where the art world, again, you're mentioning the civil rights movement, in the case of all notes being equal. So there's this crossover between what's happening socially and what's happening artistically. Or you talk about the synthesizer replacing the clarinet player and people losing jobs. So it's art and economics. It's like those two worlds are kind of
And
tied
far
together.
too often, the economics absolutely play a huge role in the acceptance of technology and
Right,
its evolvement,
right.
right?
So yes, I'm still trying to get to my question.
That's all right. I'll ask a question.
Okay.
So, what do you think, Zach, are the implications? Like, what are the current areas of concern in the next 5 years? Because listen, we know we talked about the fear side. We know the excited people. They're excited because they love innovation, right? They know that it opens up doors and they're willing to go in them, like without even taking a moment to pause. They just want to try it out and eat it up and see what it does. So, like, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
So if we're like to think about like the next like 5 years or so, and like what kind of like to see like down the road if we were even able to, and kind of like check out what might be an area of concern.
Mhm.
Some things, going back to the talking about the economy and jobs, talking about art's inherent value, right? Or the commodification of art, I think is really something when we haven't really answered what is the worth of our art when a human has quote unquote entirely made it from scratch. What is the worth of art that has either been made in conjunction with technology to a huge degree in a generative way,
Right.
or has been made entirely by artificial intelligence, and a human is trying to in a way say that their prompting of AI to generate that is worth value. I'm not saying it is one way or the other. I think that it's something that's going to have to be figured out. Um,
Well, just like
and a
sampling had to be
consensus,
figured out, right?
yeah,
In a way.
yeah. And
I,
it's
I,
tough because I feel like a consensus will be found, but via gravity, via the settling of things, and not necessarily in the best way. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that will have to be seen because so in the world of art, I think about somebody like Marcel Duchamp, who, at the beginning of the century was, well, I mean, the beginning of the 20th century was making works that he called ready-mades. So the most famous work of his being the urinal. So he takes a urinal off a wall, sticks it into an art exhibition, and signs it. And so, and so it's now considered to be an iconic and great work of art. Or the one of my favorites called Bicycle Wheel. It's a wooden stool with a bicycle tire attached to the top of it. You can spin it. My daughter actually has the tattoo on her arm of this. But again,
That
they were ready. So they really challenged this notion of what is originality, right? But again, we moved past it because we realized no, it was a point that was being made. So the same way you talk about serial music, you understand that this is not something you listen to cruising in your car on a Sunday. It's like or when you're taking a jog. There's a point that's being made.
or maybe people do. We're not going to be judgy here.
Yes. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong.
It's that art is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, but there's an understanding, as time goes on, there's an understanding that this is simply a particular mode of expression that's making a particular point. It doesn't mean that there's no such thing as originality or that originality is no longer important, but there are other conversations to be had. Yeah, I think it's
So
worth it.
yeah, absolutely. So Zach, where do you think artificial intelligence is going to have its greatest impact? Specifically, how's it going to affect arts educators at differing levels, like elementary, high school, middle school, that whole thing? Because I think our audience is primarily, educators thinking about like, how is this going to impact me?
Absolutely. Well, the very first and most functional impacts I think that are seeable and I think can be spun in, for lack of a better word, spun in a positive way, is functional improvements from day-to-day things. Like the idea that you can now use artificial intelligence to generate a transcript of a YouTube video and use artificial intelligence to pull that transcript and find multiple choice questions that can be asked,
Right.
so on and so forth. Different ways that you know like some things, like marinating, like whatever you're cooking for dinner, like the time that is spent is important, and
Mhm.
some things are not that way. And I think like file management, I think making sure, like rubric generation. I think there's a lot of things that day to day can be assisted by teachers and could have impact sooner than later, if not like these are things that you really like might want to consider doing now.
Absolutely. Like lesson
Moving forward,
plans, right? Lesson plans, creating slide decks to support your lessons you're delivering in class and how AI can assist with populating them and giving sequence and things like that.
yeah, for sure. And there's also the idea of having students, go away from maybe traditional assessment models that AI can kind of fill the role of. And so it's the idea of, am I teaching today's learner or tomorrow's learner? Am I giving them things that will actually be useful to them? Because, this essay that I'm asking them to write at home can be performed by AI. As a music production teacher, I don't assign any essays, but I do think about the Easy Drummer from particularly like Soundtrap, um, which I think does have value. It's an AI drummer that will read, and check out everything you've made before it, and will then generate its own drum track.
Mm,
You as a teacher have to decide, well, just like anyone can ask AI to make an essay now. So what's the value of writing an essay? Not to say there isn't. It's the same as, well, what's the value of kids being able to program drum beats? And I think there is value.
and I think this ties into our previous conversation to Edric about meaningful curriculum, right? And how we determine what it's coming back to the question of like, what do you want the kids to get out of this, and how does it connect outside of our insular classrooms, right? And how are we preparing them for the future? And this all kind of like circles around that really important point that I think too many people aren't talking about, like what you have to, like, instead of being like guard up, like, this is our reality. This is our kids' reality. And we have to be willing to step out of our comfort zone sometimes, and when we're of the unknown, and be able to, because our role is to educate them, and it's not going to go away.
Yeah, and I think what you said earlier about somehow, if you can, getting comfortable with uncertainty, because you don't really know. You're responsible to prepare kids for a future that is going to be very different than the future that you were projecting for when you were being educated, right? So
Right.
you're going to figure out a way to take that hard look into the future somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. We talked about so many things today. And we are at the end of this episode. But Zach, thank you so much. Any final thoughts for our listeners today?
Yes, final thoughts. Just moving forward. Main things on my mind when I think about AI and going forward is the ideas of escapism and connectivity. Um, I think really where we can either go left or right down the path
Mhm.
is path of the future is, are we going to use this in a way that increases our ability to connect or increases our ability to escape and connect to each other and escape from the things that really do need our attention and are worthwhile. And so that is kind of the main thing on my mind, just kind of this left or right, and what I'm excited to see happens moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This was an amazing conversation. Listeners, we hope you enjoyed it as much as Edric and I enjoyed having it with Zach. Zach, thanks for being here with us today. Any last thoughts from you, Edric?
No, that pretty much sums it up. I mean, yeah, the sense of where we're going and what our values will be in terms of how we decide and what's important to remain with and what directs our use of technology.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks, Zach. Listeners, we'll see you in the next episode.